Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the hazards ranged against Rishi Sunak, most of which are of his own making, as we are less than 2 months away from Tory MPs being able to demand a confidence vote in their leader with relatively modest numbers. Can Sunak show them some signs of progress, or will he be as well to go for an election this year? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, although the general election looks overwhelmingly likely to be next year, the window for this year is still there. Since the Fixed Terms Parliament Act 2011 was dissolved, Rishi Sunak can unilaterally call a general election, even if his party are against it. And when he does so, the election itself can be held as little as 5 weeks later. So in theory, Sunak could announce it at, say, in his party's conference, and the election could take place mid-November. Now, as I've discussed before, he's not giving the impression that he wants the election this autumn, and his MPs certainly don't. The problem for them all is that although this autumn may actually be their best shot, at least in terms of limiting the damage, because it could get way worse next year. I mean, more and more chickens coming home to roost. It's absolutely insane. The scale of the defeat, which polls are portending, means that the Tories think they're better off waiting for something to turn up to restore their fortunes. It's just that I'm looking at it and thinking, well, look what's happened already. I mean, you could have had the election, this May, and you could have got away with all those bruising local election results, and you would have landed Labour with these school buildings crisis. Now you've lumped it yourself. If I were a Tory MP, I'd be thinking to myself, is there anything that's going to hit next year that could actually make things way worse? Because we've been underfunding public services for a while now. Is there anything else hiding behind the wall? But anyway, if with some MPs, if they don't think something's going to turn up to make things better, they may at least think, well, we've got another year to rob the Treasury to feather our nest. But all of this sounds like a general election this year is off the table, and it almost is. The route to an election in the very short term is not likely to be strategic, but due to Conservative instability. At the end of October, Rishi Sunak will have been party leader for a year, which means that he's no longer immune to confidence votes. So with the current number of Tory MPs, if 53 of them think that things are so bad that Sunak is leading them to wipe out once the general election is called, and they think changing to someone else might con the public into thinking the party's having a viable reset, then they can submit letters of no confidence to 1922 Committee Chair Sir Graham Brady, and a confidence vote in his leadership will be called. Being clear, Sunak will win this vote. But just holding the vote will be incredibly damaging for him. Sunak is deemed to have a majority of MPs expressing confidence in his leadership of the government. The way you become MPs, you are deemed to have the confidence of the House, which means a majority are saying, yes, you're the person to be Prime Minister. It is taken as read that the vast majority of opposition MPs do not have confidence in him. So if the number of Tory MPs backing him in the vote is less than half the total number of MPs, he will be exposed as not actually having the confidence of the House. He doesn't have a majority of MPs behind him. Labour will point out to the public that this is why he can never get anything done, that nothing ever will get done while he's in charge, because he doesn't have a majority of MPs behind him. Fatal. Sunak has to avoid this at all costs. His main saving grace is that triggering a confidence vote doesn't seem to be in the interests of any of the factions vying for power in the parliamentary party. So it's not even like Boris Johnson can come back. So it would take 53 MPs acting out of either delusion or spite. Maybe Nadine Dorries wishes she'd kept her mouth shut and instead just submitted a letter herself, resigning in the new year if necessary. Speaking of which, this relates to one of the hurdles Sunak has to overcome in order to avoid a level of instability which could yet force a 2023 election. So let's go over what I think are the main issues. The first is that mid-Bedfordshire by-election. Now, Sunak has actually got a really good chance of retaining it. Weirdly, and it's very rare that this ever happens, it's genuinely not clear whether Labour or the Lib Dems have the best chance of taking this seat in the by-election. There's lots of people, and there's myself included to an extent, thinking, what we don't want to see is Labour and the Lib Dems knock each other out and let the Tories in, which actually could well happen. And we're used to thinking like that because in almost every seat, in every by-election, every general election, it's quite clear who the main challenger is. So the others should sort of lay low, as they have been doing. But there's a very tiny number of constituencies where it's genuinely not like that, where it can actually be a 3-horse race. This is one of them. So it's not obvious which one should step back, if either. But also because it's a really safe Tory seat under normal circumstances. Like, it's not going to be a target for either the Lib Dems or Labour in the general election. It'll go Tory. In the general election, it'll be Tory. You know, the only chance of taking it off the Conservatives this time is the protest vote or the apathy, lack of votes amongst Conservatives. This means that both parties are going for it, and yet they may well knock each other out and allow the Tories to just sneak it. But if Sunak does lose the seat, all of these factors make the loss way worse. You know, this could be a North Shropshire moment for Sunak. You know, that was the moment where Tory MPs had to face up to the fact that Boris Johnson meant that there was not a single safe seat in the country. So this is the point at which the vast majority of Tory MPs realise that their seat is even less safe than that one that was just lost, and decide that Sunak isn't actually helping them for the election. Which ties into the second hurdle, tax cuts. Lots of Tory MPs are agitating for tax cuts, but there's no realistic way of funding them. The economy is stagnant at best and could be in recession before next year's budget is announced. In addition, after so many years of really, truly savage cuts, the Tories have got no wriggle room in terms of reducing public spending. That is why the tax rate is the highest it's been in my lifetime. Because they've strangled the economy and they've cut services to the point where they can't cut them anymore. So the only thing left to do is to keep raising the rate of tax. But some Tory MPs feel that they have to have these tax cuts. Because at the moment, they're going into the election and their Labour or Lib Dem or whomever challenger is going to be saying, oh, the party of low taxation, yeah, we've got the highest tax rate in generations, mate. Generations. So some Tory MPs feel they have to have these tax cuts in order to challenge for their seat. Or without it, they have nothing. That's what they think anyway. They're probably wrong, but that's what they think. And if Sunak won't give them those tax cuts, they may feel that he is a barrier to their continued journey on the gravy train. Especially if there's a possible replacement waiting in the wings that is whispering in their ears, I'd deliver it. I could see how we could do tax cuts. I'll give you your tax cuts. Labour are already planning to point out that Tory MPs are wanting a Liz Truss Mark II. And it might actually be true enough in enough cases to cause Sunak problems. Right now, the problem for Sunak is convincing his MPs that it would make things worse if they replace him. Because he can't argue at the moment he's leading them to victory. He keeps saying, oh yeah, I've got this plan to win. No, you haven't, mate. You know, he can't really convince them. Anyone at the moment that's not believing they can win, he's not going to convince them with the current polling, right? So his problem is saying, well, it'll get even worse. He needs to say, it'll be much worse if you try and get rid of me. Now, for what it's worth, I think it would. But the polling is so bad that it only takes a few dozen MPs to think that it actually can't get worse than this, and he's in trouble. And remember, it doesn't matter how many seats the Conservatives are on for winning or losing. It's each individual MP looking at their own seat. Right now, polling says 2/3 of them are gone. That means 2/3 of MPs are thinking, right, I'm not going to be an MP after the next election if things carry on as the way they are. And it only takes, and you know, that's 4 to 5 times as many MPs as are needed to trigger this confidence vote at the end of October. So it only takes 1 out of every 4 or 5 MPs looking at their seat going, well, that's gone, to put in that letter. That's all it takes. And this is, after all, what forced them to drop Johnson in the end. And you know, and the fact that they were looking at the situation and going, well, who to replace him with? And there came a point where they just said, anyone will be better than this. It turns out they weren't right, but you know. And at the time, they were not looking at an election loss this bad. But the tax cuts are not at all feasible. Apart from anything else, they've now got to find some more money for building replacements, don't they? Which brings me on to the third. I've already said that this school's building scandal has the potential to be the biggest Tory scandal of my lifetime. All it takes is for a real tragedy, like a child losing their life, to a collapse in a school, which is on the government's list, completely over for them. That's it, finished, gone. Forget it. Parliament returns tomorrow with yet another Tory disaster hanging over them. Labour have said they're going to force the publication of the affected schools with a humble address if the government do not publish them beforehand. It will require a vote in Parliament, of course. That vote is going to take place next week. That's what Labour say, or this week, I should say, now coming. And can you imagine enough Conservative MPs voting to keep parents in the dark to block it? No, that's not going to happen. So Parliament is in session again for just a few weeks before the conference season recess, and we're already going to be getting high drama immediately. Rishi Sunak was supposed to be the leader who would bring stability to both his party and the government. This is not stability. This is chaos on the same level as Truss and Johnson before him. It seems inconceivable that Sunak is going to be able to ride September out without announcing a plan designed to deal with this crisis. And that plan is going to cost. And every penny of that cost is extra to Hunt's budget plans. I see that the Lib Dems are calling on Sunak to call a Cobra meeting to coordinate what is clearly a national crisis. The fact that he has not done so is genuinely bewildering. I mean, that would have been an obvious, at least just for the show, just to show the public he was taking it seriously. Right now, if you were to put it to Rishi Sunak, you're not taking this crisis seriously, what can you do to convince me otherwise? All he'll be able to, I'm totally taking it seriously. Yeah, your word's not going to cut it, mate. Where's the visibility of your concern? Doesn't exist. There's no visibility of concern. No Cobra meeting. No, we knew about this some time ago. We've got these plans ready. None of that. You know, he's not taking this emergency serious, and it's obvious. And it's front page news, and he's still not taking it seriously. And I'll tell you how bad this crisis is. The Sunday Express, so the Express and the Sunday Express are the loyal Tory lapdogs, right? They will back any Tory leader. They had no idea how to distract the public today. Do you know what they went for on their front page today? It's about halving inflation. It's like, oh my God, they've run out of ideas, haven't they? This is the line that Labour think is irritating voters, because the Tories are boasting about inflation targets when everyone can still feel the cost of living continuing to get worse. Reminding them about this is not going to be a good distraction. Now, those are, I think, the big three areas which I think could get MPs to decide that something needs to happen, whether it be a new leader or just get the general election out of the way and done. There are other problems for Sunak as well. Mortgages are still going up. And with each passing month, more and more people are coming off their fixed rates and into much higher repayments without much higher incomes. Remember, it's not just that incomes have fallen below inflation recently. That would be normal. You know, we've had sort of, if not an actual recession, then recessionary environment. So it is quite normal for like 2 or 3 years for pay to fall below inflation. But this has been 15 years straight for many workers. The new mortgage payments are going to be way less affordable than when they last fixed the rates. And this is happening all the time. Every month that passes, that's loads more voters being hit with this Tory cost of living premium. The Conservative Democratic Organisation, which is the Boris Johnson fan club, they're still snapping at Sunak's heels. They will aim to trip him up at the party conference in 1 month's time, and then again with Nadine Dorries's book in November, now that its publication has had to be delayed. If the Tories leave the election another year, holes in other policies will be exposed. Sunak reckons he has legislation to stop the boats. Well, the legislation is in place now, so it should work, shouldn't it? It can't work overnight. Okay, fine. So if you have the election in another year, that's not overnight, is it? If it's still not worked then, it's still not worked, has it? Leave it another year, the lies will be exposed. Sunak also reckons he's chopped EU environmental protections in order to get houses built. Won't result in any extra houses. This will also be exposed if he leaves it another year. That's the problem with coming out with a nice sounding policy. Once it's had time to be bedded in, people want to see results. They're not going to see results. So if he leaves it another year, it's obvious there's no results. The electoral situation for the Tories is really dire right now, but it actually could be worse next year. And if enough Tory MPs decide that as chaotic as another leadership bun fight would be, it would not be any worse than continued atrophy under a clearly out of his depth Rishi Sunak, then we may actually see a challenge. And how would Sunak and his allies then react? the only way to head it off would be to call an election. But like I say, this is not especially likely, because I don't think there are 53 Tory MPs who have it in their interest to destabilise their leadership again. But it is possible. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.